I'm an adoptive mom of an 8-year-old boy, and I am a mom of a 3-month-old girl. My name is Sarah, and I'm a miraculous mama.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Miraculous Mamas podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Joy, and I just want to thank all the mamas who are doing these amazing intros for me. And if you are listening and you want to do an intro telling us why you're a miraculous mama, reach out to me. You can DM me on Instagram or join our Facebook group and tag me, and we will get you on so that you can share what makes you a miraculous mama. You don't have to have a crazy story or, anything wild in order to share what makes you miraculous. So definitely reach out to me. So I am going to update you guys super, super quick on, the tongue and lip tie journey with Jovi. And then we are going to dive into our episode with Hunter Clarke-Fields. She is amazing. And I learned a lot from her in this episode. And before we do all of that, if you're listening, make sure that you hit the subscription button, and to leave us a review. Tell us why you love the podcast. The more reviews that we have, the more our podcast gets out there. So make sure that you are sharing it and spreading it with your friends and your, coworkers, people who are on this motherhood journey, as well, so that they don't feel alone, that we can just kind of bring them into our community and be able to connect with them. So with Jovi, her tongue and lip tie got released a few weeks ago, and we've been doing the stretches. Everything's good. We've gone to cranial sacral therapy. The hard thing with her is that a lot of babies who have a tongue or a lip tie might not be eating very well or gaining weight. Well, she has ate great, and gained weight from the beginning. So, I didn't really know based on that, but just from our pediatrician, the lactation consultant, and how she was latching, that's kind of how we found out. And so she got her release done, and I felt like breastfeeding got better for like a week, and now it's back to painful latching, and my nipples are raw again. And it's just such a struggle, man. It's so hard to know, like, how to fix it or to feel like you're doing everything right when there's a lot going on. But we're going back to a lactation consultant, hopefully trying to fix her latch. At her last pediatrician appointment, she said that she could hear a lot of trapped gas, which we knew that she's kind of a gassy baby. And despite that, has a pretty good temperament. I know a couple of weeks ago, I talked about the week from hell that we had, and I'm so glad that we got through that and that passed. And I feel like she's kind of back to just being a normal baby, and all babies are going to fuss. All babies are going to cry sometimes. That's how they communicate with you and tell you what their needs are. And, she's great. I love her so much. And I'm so glad that she's not in pain like she was after her procedure. But we're still figuring things out. This journey is not easy at all. I thought by now, 10 weeks after she's born, that we'd have latching down and that, my nipples wouldn't hurt anymore, but that's just not our truth right now. But I'm definitely going to keep you guys updated. We're trying to work on bottle transition right now as well, since I'm going back to work at the hospital, being on call as a doula there, which I'm really looking forward to. I miss going to births, and I'm excited to get back in it. I'm definitely very, very nervous to leave Jovi though, because all the bottles we've tried so far, she's hated, but we're going to keep trying and keep working it out. So yeah, I wanted to give you guys an update. I know that people have asked, and I just feel for all the mamas out there who are just dealing with that, the feeding struggles. It's not even necessarily breastfeeding struggles, just the feeding struggles of trying to figure out what's best for your kid, what formula works, what bottles work, does their stomach hurt? Is it something I'm eating? Is it, something in their formula? Is it whatever? It's tough just trying to figure out what is best for your kid and doing the best that we can. And I want you to know that all you mamas are doing awesome out there. Just the fact that you even care and want to figure these things out, like your baby does feel loved by you, and your baby loves you so, so much. And you were chosen to be the caretaker of your child for a reason, and that you got this motherhood thing. So we are going to dive into our interview with Hunter to talk about mindfulness in parenting, but it goes so much deeper than that. It's not just like meditating and, the woo-woo stuff. It's about so much more, and even going into your own triggers and definitely learning as you go, but also growing as you go. And she's just so awesome in articulating what mindful parenting is and helping to teach us how we can learn and grow and and be better. So I'm so excited for you guys to hear this interview. Hey everyone, I have Hunter Clarke-Fields here, who I'm so excited to talk to because she is the Mindful Mama Mentor. And as someone who is newly postpartum, I feel like I could use some of that in my life. I shared pretty openly a couple weeks ago about how I was having a really rough time, and I feel like what I hear from people is the newborn stage can be hard, but it also gets harder as your kids get older, and then they start to talk back and they start to like hit you and all these things. So I'm like, I need some advice from Hunter. So thank you so much for agreeing to come on the podcast.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Yes, it is. It's yes, all the things you said. Yes. The newborn stage is amazing and hard. Mm-hmm. It is really hard. And when they start talking back, whoa, you thought you were preparing for that. Like you were preparing for the birth, you're preparing for those first 6 months. That's all you're focused on. And then it's like, I feel like for me anyway, it personally like hit me like, oh my goodness, there's a lot more going on here now.
Yeah. Well, and for me, I guess like, obviously I'm not to that place yet, but, already I think, okay, so like I guess we'll just kind of dive right into it. But before I dive into it, why don't you tell us about your story, who you are, and how did you become the Mindful Mama Mentor?
Sure. Yeah. This work came about because I did hit that wall when my daughter was 2 or really like 18 months and started to kind of talk back to me and have all this resistance to me and all of these things. But it kind of goes back a little further than that. I've always been really highly sensitive person and kind of used to fall into these pits of just like feeling like life couldn't handle things. And so I discovered mindfulness and I started practicing, a few years before I got pregnant with my daughter. And it was like this life-changing thing for me. I didn't go into those pits anymore. I mean, it wasn't easy, but it just really made this big difference. So when I was pregnant, I remember actually like sitting in a meditation circle, being pregnant and being like, oh yeah, like I got this. This is going to be such a peaceful child. Look at us. Like we're sitting here meditating together. This is going to be amazing. And it was like this shock to the system. Everything about her birth was like fast and furious and was really intense. And she ended up being this like really intense, highly sensitive kid, go figure, baby, and all of that. But then it really was like when she started walking and talking, and I hadn't really prepared. I had thought that like parenting was instinctual. Like we think we don't need to like learn anything, I don't know why. This is the most important thing, but I thought that I didn't need to, it would just be instinctual. I just know what to do. And I wanted to be this way. I wanted to be peaceful. I wanted us to have a great relationship. So I thought that I thought that if I could if that's what I wanted, I could just will that to be it that way, like I could just, that's how I could choose to be. And when, but the truth is that our responses aren't instinctual at that point. Like, yes, we have instincts when we have a newborn to connect, all those things. Yes. But when our child is older, our responses are not instinctual. They are conditioned by our family of origin and our culture. The things that we think of as instinctual are really like kind of conditioned responses to events that were in our own lives and in general in our lives. So that when I started to respond to her and kind of create boundaries for her and things like that, the words that were coming out of my mouth weren't so skillful, right? Like this was just like the things that my parents may have said to me, because it wasn't something I was thinking about completely. It was like just this, I was just responding to the moment. And she had a ton of resistance to me, and it was just like I felt like she was this little powder keg, like we were just like, oh my gosh, is she going to explode any moment? And it was really, really hard. I remember just really being like crying on the floor, on the landing of my stairs, because I had yelled at her and I'd clearly scared her. It's so crazy to like look back at those pictures and see how darned cute she is and be like, how did I get that angry? But like my anger really came out, and it really was this, it was like my father's anger, and I could see that, and just really seeing like, oh, I'm feeling like I'm a terrible parent. What's wrong with me? And I'm used to, I'm like one of those people who's like used to being good at things. Like I can achieve things. I can get the good grades. I can do the stuff. And then here I was, this most important thing in my life, and I was really failing at it. I could see like it was like creating this division. And so, it just set me on this path of like intensive learning and study. And I really saw, I started learning about peaceful parenting and different ways to respond and things like that. But I would get very, very frustrated with that, because it was always like step one, pause. And it's like, but there's all this stuff before step one. So I started to really dive into that. I've gone to trainings and studies at all these different things. And I really so basically I take all of that and I put that into the work that I do. I distill it down to kind of the best things and put it into the mindful parenting method, but really is about bringing together that inner work, right? Like we think we can just like respond, right? The way we want to respond, right? But that's this kind of superficial thing. And if we don't sort of change from the inside out, we end up kind of falling back on old habits and things like that. So there's really this work of like mindfulness and self-compassion to really transform that inner experience. So then it's really this authentic outer experience that we're sharing. So it's about bringing those things together, like that skillful communication piece and that inner work piece, and bringing them really together.
So basically it sounds like parenting is just a giant inner therapeutic session.
Oh my goodness. Like, no kidding. Like, you want to know what your issues are?
Right.
Hang out like for 24 hours with the 3-year-old and you will be like, oh, here's something I need to work on. And here's something I need to work on. And here's another thing, because they'll show you what all your triggers are.
Yeah. True. We are going to pause this episode so I can tell you about Drops, the eco-friendly cleaning solution that also has eco-responsible packaging. Its powerful formulas contain plant-based ingredients, and it is custom cleaning solutions for every need: sensitive skin, baby laundry detergent, stain and odor laundry, dishwasher detergent pods, wool dryer balls designed to replace disposable dryer sheets. And I absolutely love them. It saves time, it saves water, and you don't have to measure anything out. I don't know about you, but with the big, bulky laundry detergent containers, I'm always trying to get every single drop out of there, putting it upside down, trying to measure it out. It always gets messy. But with these, it's already pre-packaged, these little pods that you just throw in at the bottom of your washing machine and run it. It is so convenient. And with a baby at home now, we're doing more cleaning, making sure that everything is nice and clean. We're getting dust out and all the different allergens. But it's really hard to find eco-friendly cleaning products that actually work. So make sure that you check out Drops, the laundry and dishwasher detergent pods that everyone is talking about. With over 10,000 5-star reviews, you'll see in no time how great their products are. Drops delivers powerful cleaning from nature with plant and mineral-based formulas to your door in a low-waste cardboard packaging instead of plastic containers that end up in our oceans and landfills. Sign up for auto shipments to save big. You can pause, skip, or cancel anytime. Visit drops.com/mamas and use code mamas for 25% off your first order. That's drops, DROPPS.com/mamas. Now back to the episode. I've heard becoming parents. So basically, like, when you become a parent, your children are your biggest mirrors, right? Reflecting back to you, like you just said, like, here's all my issues. So like thinking of that, it's like, so when you were describing what you did, like a bunch of things popped into my mind, but, like, since it happens with everybody who has kids, right? So you have kids, you realize you have issues and then your kids have kids, they realize they have issues. So is there like you said, you kind of hear yourself, talking maybe as your parents did, is there some sort of like generational thing that is just carried on with it?
I think so. It's interesting to see actually what the research says about this. And they say that the researchers point out that if you don't do any work to kind of like address and old hurts and things from your childhood, you're definitely doomed to repeat them. And if you are like, I definitely don't want to I don't want to be anything like my parent and I reject them completely, you're also doomed to repeat them because you're not like ever doing the work to kind of deal and process with those old wounds. So the work that we do in mindful parenting is really about changing those generational patterns. You know, I can see that my anger was my father's anger. Like, I remember being a little kid and hiding behind the door and being scared of him stomping down the hallway. And I love my father. He has so many great qualities. He's a real cheerleader in many ways and very loving, but he has this anger. But I can see also that it wasn't his fault and it wasn't my fault. Mm-hmm. It's not about placing blame, but it's about seeing that he was suffering because of the way he was raised. And we've had conversations about it. It's really interesting. We had a conversation about it once when he was visiting, where I remember he was like sitting on the futon we were talking about. And he said, yeah, like, you know, it was kind of earlier on in my journey. And he said, yeah, it's like my father beat me with a strap, you know, and then I spanked you and now you're trying to like not hit your kids. And I'm like, great. Like, but I want to do more than just not hit my kids. You know what I mean? Like, I want to kind of take this, I want this, like, kind of the buck to stop with me as far as this. And I mean, I know my kids are going to have whatever issues. Like, there's going to be things like that. They need to have challenges in their life. I don't want to protect them from every challenge in their life. I just don't want that to be me. Mm-hmm. You know, I want my relationship with them to be authentic and loving and not, I don't want to be scary to them. And I don't want to use techniques and strategies that are outdated and actually ineffectual, like threatening and yelling and punishments and things that will make them rebel against those strategies when they're teens, right? Like, I really don't believe that adolescents are rebelling against their parents. They're rebelling against the discipline strategies that people just kind of unconsciously use that create this like disconnection. And so I really want to create cooperation from the inside out. You know, I really kind of thought the whole thing was crazy. Like, I'm sorry, I'm going on, but like, well, I remember learning about somebody who didn't use timeouts or something when my daughter was 2, and I thought, oh my God, that's nuts. Do they want this, you know, undisciplined child? You know, now I've never used them. I haven't used them at all. Mm-hmm. And my kids cooperate with me. It's really interesting to like, there's a real shift in thinking that can happen as we start to dive into this and start to transform these patterns and ways of thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so interesting. And so my husband and I were actually talking the other night about, I feel like every person kind of has some sort of feeling toward their parents, like some underlining whatever. But he and I both went through a program. So we're both certified life coaches. So through going through that process, like we learned so much about like basically everyone's doing the best they can based on what they know and how they've been taught. So like you said, it's not like your father's fault or whatever it is. It's people are reacting to what they've been shown and how, you know, it's usually not their intention. Like, oh, I'm going to intentionally make my daughter scared of me, or I'm going to intentionally hurt you. You know, it's usually out of anger or another emotion or reaction. And so we were talking and I'm like, so our kids, so we were trying to like identify what our things are. Like, what are the things that like feelings we may hold toward our parents, or like things that we don't want to pass on and things that we do, but it's kind of like inevitable, like no matter what, like everybody almost has parent issues. So like, are we just bound to mess our children up in some way?
No, I don't believe that. I mean, we know that our brains are plastic and can grow and change, right? Like, so we repeat certain patterns. Our brains repeat certain patterns because it's interesting because it is actually literally easier for the neurons to connect in a well-worn groove. Literally a well-worn groove in the brain. It's really fascinating. And so as you start to create new patterns, it's not such a well-worn groove. You know, you're kind of like hacking through the forest rather than going down the superhighway, right? But the truth is, what we practice grows stronger. And as we can practice to understand our triggers, right? And heal the heart and the mind and the nervous system, we can transform those things. So our nervous system is wired to respond to threat, right? And to protect ourselves and to survive. And we're also wired to like push away things that are uncomfortable and hold on to things that are comfortable, right? Like those are some of the two basic things that are happening here. And so we can work with that when we can understand the way the nervous system and the biology of our bodies and minds work. We can work with that. There's a lot of strategies and tools out there to start to heal those old wounds. So for instance, something may happen where it triggers, it may trigger an old response for me, but having done the work to heal that wound by consciously feeling it, by consciously understanding it, by consciously offering myself, nourishing self-compassion, all of those things, by going through these processes, those old wounds may say, oh, look, here's this thing again, but we don't feel, it doesn't feel so like, it doesn't just trigger a reaction, right? I'm able to, at this point, like hold space for, oh, here's that old thought that popped up again. Isn't that interesting? And kind of hold it there and say, oh, okay. And not be pushed and pulled by it so much, right? So that way I can, this is really the power of mindfulness, right? Is this ability to, over time, to be able to choose how you want to respond rather than just have this reactivity pushing you into responses. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. We are going to take a quick break from this episode to talk about a fun way to connect and be competitive with your loved ones. And that is through Best Fiends. You can forget your day-to-day worries, take a little break for yourself, and clear a few levels of this amazing game, Best Fiends. It is the 5-star rated mobile puzzle game. And one of my favorite things of it is the monthly themes, how you get to collect different things. Last month I was collecting pumpkins, and how every single time, there's always something new. It's constantly updating and changing. You're never going to run out of levels because they're always continuing to create more. I'm currently in the 900s, y'all, and killing it. I also am very competitive, so I do play against a few people, and I like to crush them. So it's fun to get on there. It's fun to collect the different characters and to be able to upgrade them and evolve them and continue to see what they're going to come out with next. They have over 100 million downloads. That is right, 100 million downloads, because it is a 5-star rated mobile puzzle game. And seriously, once you download Best Fiends, boredom will not stand a chance. And I am just a little bit obsessed with it. And right now you can download Best Fiends free today on the Apple App Store or Google Play. That's Friends without the R, Best Fiends. Now back to the episode. When it comes to parenting, what I've been told is like, everyone's going to give you advice, but like basically just throw it all out the window, because every baby's different. Every situation's different. There's just like nothing you can really do to fully prepare you for it. But like, is there something to prepare you for the parenting aspect? Because like you said, I feel like people plan for a birth, or they plan, you plan for your wedding, you plan for your birth, you plan like different things, but how many people actually pick up a parenting book or, things like that? And so like, is there ways to actually prepare yourself for it?
Yeah. I mean, I have heard that advice too, but I remember kind of taking, it's interesting because we can think about it with anything. Like I remember thinking about that in some ways for pregnancy. Like for my first pregnancy, I was like, oh, if I'm going to my way of thinking about it was like, if I'm going to jump off a cliff, I'm not going to think about it ahead of time. I'm just going to go. Yeah, that was like my whole mindset. And it wasn't that, like, it was like really intense and fast and furious in a, tour and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
So then I learned my lesson. And for pregnancy number 2, I was like, I am preparing and I am practicing. And so I did like hypnobirthing, meditations every afternoon. I would take a little nap with my hypnobirthing meditation, my rainbow relaxation. It was amazing. And the whole difference it was such a difference. As we drove to the birth center, I had those headphones in and I was relaxing my body. And the whole birth, my husband could see it from the very beginning. Like my whole birth was so different. Like I had one of my nurses say to me, "Oh my God, I touched your hand and you were relaxing me." Like it was this whole different experience. So, and I think the same can be said for parenting in a way. Like this really is the most important thing. So it is in the very same way, it is helpful to think about like, what do you want? Like, what is the outcome that you want? What are you going for? What do you envision, right? Just as you would for a birth or pregnancy, you think, what is it that you do want, right? So you think about that. And then you think, well, how do I get there? And I think that is really important to envision, like, well, what do you want? Some people want, what I wanted anyway was like good relationships, right? Like I wanted cooperation. I didn't want to be yelling at my kid. I didn't want to be threatening them. I wanted them to just cooperate. But I didn't, at one point, I didn't know how to get from A to B. So it really is important to learn and study these things. So it really takes for me anyway, I really had to learn like, how do I calm my reactivity? How do I take care of those triggers? And then also like, if I want these good relationships, how do I create cooperation from the inside out? How does that work? Like, how do you hold boundaries without, using threats and punishments? How do you create connection with people? So the interesting thing about it is like parenting is just like a lot of other relationships, right? Like, except we don't realize how embedded certain beliefs and things about children and parents are in us, like the way we kind of speak to children culturally, et cetera. Like we don't even realize those things. So there is a lot to learn. I would disagree with the throw it all out the window advice, because if you do, you're just going to repeat what you've known.
Yeah.
Because that's what we do. And the truth is we can't just hope that it's going to be better, or just like, will it to be better. Like when we're in a situation, we respond.
Mm-hmm.
And willpower isn't like a great strategy. Like hoping isn't like a great strategy. It actually doesn't work that well. There's like practices and tools and learning to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I remember, which I mean, I'm going to need all those tools. 'Cause when we talked briefly last month, telling you about like, I feel like I'll need to learn how to not yell at my children, which is interesting because I don't think most people would perceive me as like a very angry person. And growing up, I can remember 2 times in my entire life that my dad has yelled at me. And both times I deserved it. Once I was 18, once I was 21. So I was an adult and I was being irresponsible. And in those moments, I'm like, yes. So, I don't really remember my parents yelling, but I feel like I have this like inner fiery thing. And when I picture my kid, like just openly being defiant, I'm like, how do I not explode in that moment? Like, how do you not yell at your kids? Because I feel like that's just such an initial reaction when you're like, hey, don't do that. And they're like, watch me, and then you're like, how do I not yell at you right now?
Well, the truth is we all yell sometimes. Like it's not like but we don't want to be reactive all the time. So the truth, how do we not yell in those moments? It really comes down to kind of 2 things. Like there's in the moment responses, but then there's like long-term habits, right? That lower our reactivity overall. And that's why mindfulness is such a big piece, because it really does lower our overall reactivity, literally shrinks in gray matter, or shrinks the density of the gray matter of the amygdala in the brain, which are the brain's alarm bells, fight, flight, or freeze stress responses, and literally grows more dense the gray matter in the prefrontal cortex, which is your rational, logical thinking, problem solving, right? So it literally helps us to access more of our brain and become less reactive over time. So that's why that's such a big long-term piece. But in that short term, we want to, first we want to have the intention to like not lose it at our kids.
Yeah.
Because when we do yell and lose it at our kids, they are scared, and it's because you're a large person and you're threatening to their nervous system. So their fight or flight or freeze response happens. And so what happens with both of us when that stress response happens, when our nervous system perceives a threat, it bypasses the upper parts of the brain, those logical thinking parts of the brain, so that you can just instantly be reactive. And so what that means is that you can't learn when your stress response is triggered, and you can't like access a lot of parts of your brain when that stress response is triggered. So when we yell, our kids' stress response is really triggered. They can't learn anything, right? They're scared. They can't learn anything. We're creating disconnection, right? So we want to have that intention to not yell and sometimes for many of us, we have to see like, oh, this is not working. This is actually making my kid more resistant. This is not so good, because they're not learning anything. So then we practice, right? We have to practice with that. So we have to practice, well, what do we want instead? We have to say, what is the vision for what do we want, right? Well, if our child is being defiant and yelling at us, what do they need to learn in that moment? And how can we best teach it to them, right? So we can start to kind of walk back and say, what do we want? And what we do in mindful parenting is like we practice that, right? So we practice the strategy of what do we want, and then we practice that. There's like guided visualization of what do you want? How do you practice that? And also, how do you calm that stress response in that moment? And because we all are very different, we work through like a plan, right? There's like, for some of us, and I really encourage people to use a lot of Post-it notes around their house, to think about like a yell less plan. Like once you understand your nervous system, once you understand what do you want, let's make a plan for the inevitable, because then you're inevitably gonna get triggered, right? So when that happens, what works best for you? Do certain mantras work best for you? Does saying to yourself, writing down on a sticky note, I'm helping my child, work best for you? Does it help for you to remove yourself so that your nervous system is no longer seeing a threat, right? Does it help for you to just do the physical things of calming down the nervous system, like a deep breath in and slowing down the exhale? That tells our nervous system that there's no threat. So that then we can choose how to respond. And so we make a yell less plan and we practice it, and we say, okay, let's imagine that you're in this really difficult moment. We're going to go through it. We're going to walk through it. And now you're feeling all those feelings. You're feeling all the sensations in the body. And then you practice your strategy to walk that back. And one of the, and it's kind of like this sort of visualization technique is kind of like the way coaches would, like with Michael Phelps, right? They would have him visualize like being really close and go, just pushing that last bit through, right? So you visualize and practice that, and your brain doesn't know the difference. So that's one piece. And another piece is we start to name and acknowledge our feelings of what's going on earlier down in the cycle before we get to completely losing it. So sometimes parents are like, I'm calm, I'm calm, I'm calm, I'm calm, I'm calm, right? Like gritting the teeth, I'm calm. And like fake calm, fake mind, that doesn't work. It's not so effective. But instead, if you say, I'm starting to get really annoyed, I'm starting to feel really frustrated here, I need a break, all of those things are really, really helpful. It's what Dr. Dan Siegel calls name it to tame it, right? Where it actually provides a sense of relief in the brain. And it becomes this like alarm bell of like, bell of mindfulness. Oh, okay, I'm going down that path. How can I walk it back before I'm like at the explosive side of it, right? And then finally, so there's the long-term practice, right? Which is really very effective. There's a whole bunch of short-term strategies and yell less plans and things like that. And then there's the practices for when we inevitably do mess up and we inevitably do make mistakes and we inevitably make some, hurt our child, as far as like emotionally maybe in some way. And we feel terrible, right? So how do we offer ourselves some grace? How do we transform that inner voice and offer self-compassion? And the reason why we do this is because shaming and blaming and being harsh and mean to ourselves doesn't work any better with ourselves than it does with our kids. And if you have a harsh, mean inner voice, it's going to come out like sometime. You can't just like be all mean and terrible to yourself and then think you're going to be like super loving to your child. That's just not going to work, right? But if we have practices and tools to offer ourselves compassion in those moments. And then what the beauty of that is that actually allows us to bounce back quicker, be more present with our kids, and reconnect and repair our relationship more effectively. And then we begin anew.
Yeah. I feel like that makes sense. Anything that you start to practice, right? Then any sort of habit, they're like, you got to start practicing it and doing it. And then it kind of becomes a part of your life. I feel like with mindfulness, a lot of people hear the word mindfulness now, though, and they think like woo-woo type stuff, or like, oh, am I just going to be meditating and being like Zen and like, and for some people that's really, really hard. So I feel like the word mindfulness is almost a trigger for some people. I can imagine. Like, how do you explain it not just being this like meditative thing.
Yeah, well, meditation is a really great way to practice mindfulness.
Yeah.
And I can see that it is a trigger for some people because it is really hard, not just for you or me. It's like really hard for everyone. It's so hard that there's like, it's really simple, right? I should just say that. And everybody can practice, but it is difficult. Like there's actually a term from an old term that's called noble failure because it's not so easy. So many people think like, oh, mindfulness is so frustrating. Like I can't clear my mind. And no, you're not supposed to be able to clear your mind. Your mind thinks just like your ears hear, and you're not going to turn off your hearing, right? You're not going to clear your mind. But what it is I kind of think of it as a brain hack, right? That as we start to sit still, as we start to be with the sensations and the thoughts and the feelings that are arising in the present moment, then they start to not have so much power over us. They start to not push and pull us. We can surf those waves rather than be pushed and pulled. And I kind of think of it as this parental brain hack because it's all the things we need. Like it helps us to really calm our reactivity and be able to respond rather than react. That lowering our reactivity piece is really, really important for parents. But there's all these other benefits like better sleep, less anxiety, less depression, all those like it's amazing how much the studies have shown. But yeah, there is a lot of resistance to this. There's like a natural desire in the human being, like because we're wired to survive and it to kind of always be moving forward and going forward. But there's a lot of drawbacks to always moving and going forward, right? Like, so if you think about when you're with your child, are you actually able to be really present? So if we're always practicing in our brain to like, okay, I'm looking at my beautiful child nursing and I'm thinking about what outfit will I put on them? Like, do I have enough diapers? When are we, how are we going to go handle Thanksgiving? Like, what are we going to, like we're constantly in the future planning future things. Maybe what will she be like? All of these things. Then we can't really be there in that moment. Now, we have flashes of it, but there's a huge difference. And, for me, a big driver for me is this piece of not only just having more peace in my life, and for me personally, which is a huge benefit for everybody I touch. But there's a quote by my teacher, the Zen master, Thich Nhat Hanh, incredible author and teacher, nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by Martin Luther King Jr. He has this quote that really drives me when I think about this. And it's like, he says that when you love someone, the best thing you can offer is your presence. How can you love if you are not there? And it's just like, I still get goosebumps like thinking about that. Like,
wow.
If you're never there, how can you love? Like, how can you be there for those little moments? Like, and so not only does it help us not yell at our kids, which is like a really great thing, and that's wonderful to do, but it really helps us to be there for, like, feel our child's hand in ours, to be able to see what they're curious about as we walk through the park, to be able to feel the air on your arms, to be able to notice and be present for all these little miracles that life is offering you with your child, and to not have it pass by. Because I can tell you now that my daughters are 13 and 10. Wow. To have one of those difficult moments back when my daughter was 2 for like an hour, what would I give? But I'm really glad that I was able to be there, really be there for as much as I could.
Yeah. Well, and when you said, that quote, I feel like I felt it in my heart. And the first thing that came to mind when you said that was like, we're such a distracted society today. Parents are so just on their phones and not paying attention and not fully present. So I feel like it is hard to be a mindful parent and to even learn how to engage and read your kids' cues and things like that when you're not fully there. And I know that's something that I've worked on too. Like I originally had a station set up for when I get up in the night and I nurse, and I had like my iPad and stuff. And the last couple of weeks, I'm like, I don't even turn it on. Like I just watch her and like say a prayer for her, or just like try to like be present. 'Cause I know I'm only going to hold my 8-week-old daughter once, you know, 'cause then she's 9 weeks, then she's 10 weeks, and you know, like, and the time everyone's like taking these moments 'cause time just goes by. And so that's really what I've been trying to do. And I feel like I love it. Like not even worrying about like taking pictures of her, which I'm like, I definitely want to get pictures of her to remember it. But like, I just don't even want to be on my phone. You know, it's like, I just want to stare at her and take it all in. So I just love that. 'Cause I feel like as she gets older, I'm sure that that'll be harder. But like you said, it's just like a practice. So you just have to start somewhere and start practicing it somehow, you know? So I gotta remember that
and
quote.
Like love is, and love is attention, right? The more we give attention to something, the more we love it, right? Like when we think about if you've all ever fell in love with a person, like they took up all of your attention, right? Like, you know, and that's that feeling of love. And if you've been loved in that way, it's like, oh, wow, this attention, this light shining on you. And that's what our love is. And it's, I want to like, for the listener, you know, if you're like, oh my gosh, like that sounds like overwhelming. Like, no, you don't have to be like the Dalai Mama. Like,
right.
You know, it's not like 100% of your time, you know. I mean, you know, Elizabeth, like you could take, you know, say if you were being really intentional about practicing to be mindful with your child, you could set a timer on your phone for 5 minutes and nurse your child, right? For 5 minutes, just really breathing and taking it in and feeling the sensations and noticing your breath and noticing when you're distracted and noticing when you can come back and just practicing, right? Like just for 5 minutes. And then maybe you might pick up your phone and like read the New York Times or whatever you're doing, right? On your phone. Yeah. It's not like all or nothing. Like you're not like this mom with some halo over your head, or you're like a terrible mom who's always, you know, distracted on the phone. Like there's room for balance, but having a little bit, claiming a little bit of that mindful time of practicing to be intentionally be in the present moment with an attitude of kindness and curiosity has so many benefits for you and your child. Like it doesn't have to be a huge amount of time, you know. Especially for people with, I work with obviously a lot of parents, right? People with many children, and it can be really small. It can be a habit that starts with 3 minutes a day or 5 minutes a day, and we have 3 and 5 minutes to like scroll through Instagram. Like we can do this, you know, like it really is so worthwhile.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, it's not like I'm never on my phone when I'm nursing, because I do like yesterday I was trying to get some marketing material done for the podcast while I was breastfeeding her, you know? So I'm like, because in those moments too, I'll remember like, oh, I got to do this thing. And if I don't do it, then I won't remember. So I'm like, I got to get this done right now. I'd love to talk about boundaries, because I feel like when I hear the word boundaries, that's something that I picture in relationship with other people, but I've never really pictured boundaries with my children. So, I mean, I guess because I've never had any till now, but, you know, like, I feel like you have to create healthy boundaries in different relationships, but when it comes to parenting, like I have zero idea what that looks like. So I'd love for you to kind of explain maybe what healthy boundaries in parenting are.
Yeah. I mean, so in mindful parenting, we start to look at like, making sure each person in the relationship is getting their needs met, right? So your needs as your child's mom are just as important as your child's are. Your infant's needs are way more pressing,
yes,
right?
yes.
Most of the time and much more immediate, right? But especially as she grows older, you're going to have to make sure that you're balancing your needs with her needs. And so you may have some boundaries that you need to have around that, especially as you have a child, right? So you, just like we kind of like childproof our house, we can create some boundaries for ourselves. Like you may need time for yourself, right? And you can create a boundary around that time for yourself by conversations with your partner and, finding support for your child and maybe kind of creating a boundary for yourself. So for instance, if you have a child who, I guess I think of like all the kind of ways we have to kind of stop children from what we think of as misbehavior as boundaries. And so what we learn is that really our kids' behavior is all about they're trying to meet some need of theirs, right? But we have to keep boundaries around them to keep them safe and to protect our own needs. So, for instance, we're not going to let our child run into the street, right? And so a lot of people use that as like a great example for like, you have to yell, right? And that you may have to yell if your child's running in the street, like, stop, right?
Yeah.
But you may also be close enough to just like put a gentle hand in front of that child and say, whoa, that's the street, or just learning, like holding that boundary. We can hold the boundary without being punitive, right? So we can say, if your 2-year-old is reaching for your iPad or something fragile, you can say, the iPad, yes. This goes up here and here you can hold this thing, right? Like that's a way to hold a boundary gently without saying stop or freaking out or telling them they're a terrible person. I'm trying to think of another example. For my 10-year-old, we have boundaries, and my 13-year-old, we have boundaries around screen time as well, right? So when we've had conversations around that, like this is, the reason why we want to kind of hold these boundaries is because we need your help to get things done around the house. You're a member. And, we also want to make sure you don't have disappear into the screen and forget how to be bored and do creative things in your life. And so we have conversations around that. And so, for instance, a boundary may be, I get it. Like you want to play Among Us with your friends.
Yeah.
But you know what? You haven't done these things from the weekend. You haven't watered the plants and you haven't put away the clean dishes. So we're just going to wait on this privilege thing until you do that, right? So that's a way to gently hold a boundary without telling them they're a terrible person, but just be like, I'm sorry, this is, we wait until we do that. Does that make sense? So we start to look at like natural results and natural consequences as ways to hold boundaries.
Okay, yeah, that makes total sense. So I'd love for you to just tell us then, where do you come in? So when do people hire you? Why? Like, how do you come alongside parents?
Well, I put everything I know into the mindful parenting course and the mindful parenting method. And it's a membership that people sign up for a lifetime. There's all kinds of issues at different ages and stages. And so that's how most people work with me, is that we have Raising Good Humans, the book, but it really takes more than it takes more than hope, right? Like it takes to really learn something, and and for me, like parenting, these relationships are like the most important thing in my life, and to transform these patterns, it takes practice, it takes support, it takes guidance, it takes learning, and it really helps to kind of like go, especially if you're in a community that is kind of like, let's spare the rod, spoil the child kind of community. It's really helps to have like these hundreds of other families who are doing things the same way and have the same intentions that you do around you as you kind of go on this path, because there'll be times that it's difficult and frustrating and you get discouraged and you need that support to kind of lift you back up and say, okay, what mistakes, for lack of a better word, am I making? How can I start to, reground and do this a little bit better?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's all in the Mindful Parenting membership, which is like the great work of my life.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I've looked at it too. I was on your website and there's so much great information on there. I did forget to mention your book earlier. So tell us about your book real quick, Raising Good Humans.
Sure. Yeah. Raising Good Humans, a mindful guide to breaking the cycle of reactive parenting and raising kind, confident kids. I'm so excited. It's like amazing that it's like out there. It's like so crazy. They're like translating it to Chinese. I'm like, whoa, what's happening? But it really does walk you through all of these pieces, where it is like how I really wanted to know how. Like I remember being that young parent being like, okay, that's great. I want to do these things, but how do you do it? So it really is a lot of the how. How do I do this? How do I turn these things around? How do I, tame my temper? How do I understand my triggers? All of those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'll definitely be reading that book because like you said, that's where I'm at now. It's like how my husband and I talk about it. We're like, how do we be good parents? Like like I was saying earlier, like how do we not pass on the things we don't want to, but keep the things that we do? And like, how do we recognize our own patterns and maybe misbeliefs and beliefs and figure out how to, we always say, we want to raise good humans. So that is like so perfect. So for people listening, where can they find your membership or where can they connect with you at?
Sure. Just at mindfulmamamentor.com, and obviously you're a podcast listener. There's the Mindful Mama podcast there. And we have as of recording, 250 episodes and the membership is there. The book is there. Everything's at mindfulmamamentor.com. And I guess, as far as I'm on social media, Instagram's probably where you can see more about the behind the scenes, and that's at Mindful Mama Mentor.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on here. I feel like I got a lot just out of talking with you, and I know that there's so much more in your course and in your book and all of that, just even little snippets from today. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. I can do this.
Yes, you definitely can, bit by bit.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I really had a good time. Thank you.
I loved chatting with her, and I'm checking out her parenting courses actually. And I'd love to let you guys know what I think of them and let you guys and try them out as well, because she's launching a new thing here in December, and I'm probably going to take the class, and then any resources that I find that I love, I'm definitely going to pass off to you guys, because like I said before, this is tough, and what works for one person might not work for another. And there's a lot of great tools and resources out there. And one thing that has helped me is, I had the Peaceful Sleeper on, Chrissy Lawler, and a while ago, and I've been taking her courses to help me with Jovi. She hasn't been a great napper, a great daytime napper. She does pretty well at night, but days are a little bit rough because I feel like I can't get much done because she doesn't nap great. But I've been working with Chrissy, and it has helped so much. And so I have a link to her courses in my profile on Instagram if you guys want to check it out, because she's a great resource that I've been using. So anything that I come across that I'm using or that I find useful, I'm definitely going to share with you guys, just to have another tool in your tool belt, because you can't have enough of those on this motherhood journey. Anyways, I love you guys. I hope that you're having an amazing week, and I look forward to sharing with you guys next week's episode. We have Elizabeth Parsons on. If you guys already haven't seen her on Instagram, she is the story that is circulating on there right now, blowing up on social media. Her birth story is full of surprises, and I don't want to give too much away. So you're going to have to listen next week to find out about it. And then we're going to actually be bringing on a few other a few other awesome guests before the end of the year. Again, if you guys have anybody that you want to hear from or any topics, please reach out to me. I am looking for a tongue tie expert to come on. I've reached out to a couple of people and haven't heard back yet. So if you guys know anybody who you think would be an awesome expert guest to come on, or somebody who wants to share their story, have them reach out to me or just connect us. Anyways, I love you guys, and I hope that you have a great week. Talk to you next week.
If you want to be the most interesting person at the cocktail party, well, hop on over and listen to the Brain Candy podcast.
Our award-winning content will have you laughing whilst you're learning.
We read all the best articles, books, and studies and keep up with new TV shows, documentaries, and pop culture. Then cram it all into 2 shows a week.
Conspiracy theories, cannibal rabbits, unsolved mysteries, the history of the Walkman. There's something for everyone.
The Brain Candy podcast. Find our link in the show notes.
Or simply search for the Brain Candy podcast on your podcast app.